whole time, the top of this kind of three-legged stool analogy is you're both critiquing each other and trying to see if it's a good fit, if you want to work together. So let's critique how well I use the S.T.A.R framework, knowing that we're going to be sticking mostly to A's and R's. So that's where in the phone screening and in the interview, you start to add a little bit more S and T. And what happens when you go S.T.A.R, it's kind of like telling the story of your experience. Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about resumes and interviewing. We're going to try to make it as easy as possible to generate, brainstorm bullet points to put on your resume that then turn into talking points for your interview. We're going to be using something called the S.T.A.R framework, if you haven't heard about it before. So I have this little PowerPoint in the background. Maybe I'll turn it to presentation mode we're going to skip straight to the kind of the meat of it. The S.T.A.R framework down here is what we're going to be talking about most of the time. So it stands for situation, task, action, and results. And the idea is that it kind of follows the chronological framework of just telling the story of what happened. So like your experiences at work. Situation is basically the general lay of the land, what was happening in the business. Task is how you were involved with that, what was happening in the business. You can think of it as what you were assigned to do. Then we just keep getting more specific as we go down. So the action is after they told you kind of what your assignment was, what did you actually do? So this is a section where you'd want to show like critical thinking and problem solving skills. And I guess here in the parentheses I say use verbs from the job description. We'll talk about that a little bit more after I finish introducing the S.T.A.R framework. The last one is the most important, is the results. Basically prove that you can do what they're asking you to do. Anytime you can include dollar values or revenue generated, improved customer service, anytime you can show an improvement in some sort of KPI, which if you're not familiar just stands for like key performance indicator. It's kind of a businessy buzzword if you ask me, but it's just a metric. It's like tracking data. And okay, yeah, so that's the framework itself. And now how do we apply it to resumes and interviewing? I guess the first thing to know is when you are submitting resumes and an application for a job, there's just the first filter. The resume is the first filter, and what you want to try to do here is just conform to the job description as much as you can. It's not really the time to stand out. They're looking for somebody who's the right fit for their organization. So we want to be using the exact language that's used in the job posting. This helps. So a lot of companies, especially larger ones, will use computer filters, and it's basically just a keyword search to weed out resumes that are just completely have no keywords. They don't share any words with the job description. So if the job description, my example here says generate, if you're supposed to generate something while you're working, don't say create or produce to try to sound, similar but different. Use the exact same word, because unfortunately more often than not these days it seems like the computer is just going to be searching for what resumes match the job descriptions the best, and the more you can use the same lingo, the higher you should rank. And on the resume, when you're using the S.T.A.R framework, a lot of times you run out of room, so you should focus more just on the A and the R, the action and the results. And I'll show you an example of mine. Here's my most recent resume. It worked to get me a new job just like in the last month. I used this resume to get a new job. So let's critique how well I use the S.T.A.R framework, knowing that we're going to be sticking mostly to A's and R's just because I'm trying to just do short bullet points. Some of the bullet points wrap for 2 lines, but you don't want paragraphs on your resume. So let's see. First one, designed and developed total product offering. So that's that's like an action. You could maybe argue it's kind of a task, but those are verbs there, designed and developed. So that would be something that I would have seen on the job posting that I'm applying for. They would have used the words designed or developed. So if the job posting said created and I used designed and developed, that would be less perfect than it could be. You want to match those verbs as much as possible. So total product offering for second largest customer. So that's a little bit of the situation. That's kind of giving an idea of the business lay of the land. And then earning 3.6 million since June of 2022. So that is a hard metric. That's a result. And anytime you can include dollars, people who are, hiring because they have a business where they need more people to help them make more money and solve problems. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about, right? Is helping the businesses make more money, whether you like it or not. Let's see. Is there any that I didn't do very well? Probably, but let's find them. Let's see. Down here, collaborated. So there's a verb. That's kind of an action. On engineering committee to create modeling and drafting standards. So collaborated and create, those are the verbs, actions. The results aren't very strong here, so it's basically we created this document that's supposed to help the engineering department work have more consistent models and drawings. So it's not like a super strong business case where you can say we saved tons of money because we were being more consistent on how we did our work, but some of those are going to be on here. Sometimes you just need to fill space, and it's still valuable. Just not everything can be tied back to a dollar amount. Sometimes that means you just can't even, maybe you don't even have access to know how much extra revenue you brought in or how much savings you brought in. That's kind of unfortunate. Sometimes you kind of have to ask around. Maybe you can talk to someone in the business who might be able to help you estimate what the dollar value of your task or action was. Let's see, is there any other? Here's an example of one that might not be, it's not dollars, but reduced fertilizer spreader cost through FEA, which is finite element analysis. That's a engineering skill, let's just call it, to test whether things are going to break before you build them, using some computer computations. So through using that FEA, we reduced the cost of some of our components by about half. So that proves savings, proves I was able to do the FEA. So hopefully you just get the idea. They're pretty short and sweet, mostly focusing on actions and results when possible. Let's go back. So this will be the first thing they see, and you want to try to provide bullet points that match the job requirements and responsibilities that are listed in the job posting. And if you pass that first filter, what usually happens is you have a phone screening, which is really just the company trying to confirm that someone who they don't want didn't just sneak through the first filter, right? So I call it confirm, the confirm stage. So you conformed, and now you're confirming that you're not just some crazy person that just happened to get past the first stage. So they'll usually talk about these bullet points and these bullet points alone. It's not always the case, but they're usually just confirming the resume, and they want to hear you talk about it a little bit to know that these are real things that you did. You might expand on them a little bit. And so that's where in the phone screening and in the interview, you start to add a little bit more S&T. And what happens when you go S.T.A.R, it's kind of like telling the story of your experience. So this is where, for interview questions, this is where I talk about how you can add in the situation and the task. When you're creating your resume, you want the bullet points to be tailored to the job that you're applying for. And so if you're applying for slightly different jobs, sometimes you'll create custom resumes for each one. So that means you might want a pool of bullet points that's larger than what fits on your resume, but then you just put the best fitting ones on each application. So that's where I talk about here, is create a backlog of those successful projects or stories that you can pull from when questions are asked, like name a time where name a difficult project where maybe all the requirements weren't defined 100% up front. What did you do? How did it go? So try to have some sort of experience that happened at your past jobs that might apply to that type of scenario, or might be useful for answering that type of question. So let's see, I didn't really pre-plan which one I wanted to talk about, so let's see how well I can do. Let's see, how about this? Okay, how about this one that we already kind of talked about? Collaborated on engineering committee to create modeling and drafting standards. So the situation would be, I wouldn't say the situation, the task, the action. I'm saying it for you guys to try to point out which part I'm going for, but you wouldn't point out, I'm using the STAR method to the person you're talking to in your interview, right? You just say, so let's see, in the engineering department, in 2023, let's say, there was a strong push to try to standardize and document all our procedures. Overall, the company was attempting to get an ISO, I can't even remember what it is anymore, ISO 9001? Anyway, certification. And that certification requires that all your procedures are documented well and everyone in the company knows how to access them and use them. And so part of that process was creating a modeling and drafting standard to improve efficiency in the department, so people know how to create these documents, and then when we're peer checking each other's work, there's a clear defined criteria that everyone has to meet. And so it cuts down on ambiguity and time spent going back and forth arguing which way is right. As long as it's consistent, that's better than everyone doing it their own way. And so I don't know how many hours that actually saved us, but it's not perfect. I'm trying to think if there's any type of metric I can think of that would sound good, right? But the idea is that we're just trying to cut down on those hours going back and forth, deciding how to do the work. So if you have this predefined standard that everyone is held to, then it's just doing the work, checking the work against the standard, and then you're done. So luckily we didn't have, I said that I just used this resume on a recent job interview. They didn't ask me about that one, so maybe that was a good thing, because I don't think I did very well right there. So anyway, do we need to talk about another one? Probably not. I think you get the idea. And if you ever want my opinion on something, you can always reach out and talk one-on-one. We can do a Teams call or a Zoom call. This is obviously part of a larger PowerPoint that I use with my one-on-one coaching clients, but I'll just end by kind of pointing out this picture up here in the corner where I mentioned the conform and the confirm. That's like when you submit your resume, you're trying to conform to the job description. When you have your phone screening, you're trying to confirm that you're not some crazy person who got past the filter by chance. And when you're in the interview, all you're trying to do for both parties is clarify the requirements, clarify the skill set, answer the question of, is it a good fit for both of us? It's not just, do I deserve the job? Oh, thank you, please give me this job. You're also interviewing them and trying to clarify, is this the type of company you want to work for? Are these the type of people you want to work with? So the whole time, the top of this kind of three-legged stool analogy is you're both critiquing each other and trying to see if it's a good fit, if you want to work together in the future. So that's all I intended to cover in this video. We'll probably make another one eventually about how to actually find good jobs to apply for, how to decide what type of jobs you want to potentially take. And so if you're interested in that, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. We'll just dive right into it. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. So it's kind of like laying the framework for, oh geez, we'll cut this part out.